Hi everybody, it's Andrea over at Sewspire.com, and I am here today with my friend Kenny Sherman, and we are in his beautiful store, Peyton's Place, here in the Plains, Virginia. Kenny is a purveyor of fine furnishings and an interior designer, and as promised, he's going to share some inside knowledge with us about slipcovers. Welcome, Kenny, and thank you for having us.
This bar stool has a short skirt so you can see all of the wooden legs. This is done with a blind seam, very simple seam. This also is easy to come apart, just slips right off. And that is a blind seam, and this again is a machine washable slipcover. If you're buying fabric to do a slipcover that's not pre-shrunk, you need to find out from where you're buying the fabric what the shrink rate is. So for instance, I buy fabric all the time, and normally a shrink rate is 30 to 40%. So I buy 30 to 40% more fabric, then I cut it, usually in half, depending on what my seamstress at the time recommends, and then I'll hot wash it in the washing machine, and then I'll hot dry it. And that way it'll shrink, so in the future after it's sewn, it won't shrink anymore, because my recommendation is always cold water and a light dry.
All right, well thank you so much, and we are going to teach you how to sew a slipcover.
That's why we're here, yes.
And as promised, we are teaching Kenny how to sew. We have taken his existing slipcover that actually ended up with a bleach stain on it, so it definitely needed to be repaired, and we have cut that apart. And when we did that, I really didn't pay much mind to the seam allowance because I planned just to add that back in when we cut out the pieces. My main objective when we started dismantling the slipcover was just to cut on the seam and then make sure that we labeled every piece so that we would know how to get it back together. Now we have a little bit of an advantage because we still have one slipcover that's intact. So we can look at that and figure out how this puzzle goes back together. In the event that you only have one slipcover and you're going to cut it up to make a new pattern, please be sure to take several pictures of the cover before you chop it up. Now Kenny still doesn't believe that this is going to come back together, but I promise you it will. And it's going to be fun because it will also be the first time that he's sewing. And I wanted him to tell you a little bit about the fabric that he selected and the print and how we chose to cut out all the pieces and any challenges that we had when we were cutting out the pieces.
Well, not knowing what I'm doing per se when it comes to cutting. So what we have here is we have a botanical, and you can see that what they call it runs up the bolt. And what that means is the fabric, as you're rolling it up, rolls up the bolt, as opposed to something that they would call railroaded, which would run lengthwise, which you could do when you have a solid fabric. With a pattern like this, which is a fairly large pattern, you waste a lot of fabric. With a pattern like this, on a slipcover like this, you're going to need about 30% more fabric, and that'll change depending on the repeat, or how many times or how wide the pattern repeats on the fabric itself. On this one, which was very challenging, just to make sure that we did it correctly, because there was a question at the beginning, is there's, as you can see, there's outside panel, there's an inside panel, a back panel, there's inside arm panels, there's the chair seat, and then underneath the chair seat there's another panel of fabric which is basically your seat panel, which runs down and becomes your front skirt. And it doesn't go all the way down to the bottom because you want to see the legs. So we identified each panel, and then we placed them correct dimensionally where they would be and in the right direction, so that we weren't accidentally cutting a panel and it would run upside down, which would be a problem, especially at my house. So that being said, we made sure that all the panels were where they go, and then again we've identified them. And the one thing that really good upholsterers do, and I don't know if we're going to achieve this the first time out, is as you see the vining, you want it to match the vining that goes up the back panel. These are two separate pieces of fabric. And that's why there's a lot of waste in patterning of fabric, because you want this to run up here to meet this one, and so that this flower runs into the right branch so that it looks seamless. And then on the front panel, you want to try to achieve the same thing as the fabric runs down to this second piece of fabric so that it matches. And that's really good upholstery. Now the seat cushion, which will also have the same pattern on the bottom, doesn't need to necessarily match as the top cushion does. And these side panels won't match the outside panel per se because they're just running up. But it's most important to get this visual field as close as possible. And I think that's about covers it.
Yes, and then Kenny asked an excellent question that I've never considered before. We called 2 experts in the field and they'd never been asked this question before. And it was, what kind of thread am I using? Now, lots of people take into consideration the type of thread they're using based upon your application. But for this, I had selected a Gutermann or Gutterman 100% cotton thread. And he insisted that that cotton thread would shrink.
It's been my experience that if it's cotton and it's not pre-shrunk, that when you do wash it, and I wanted this to be a machine washable slipcover, that it didn't shrink. So we called the factory that made the chair, Lee Industries, and then we contacted a representative of, what's the name of the thread?
Gutermann, I think,
Gutermann.
but I am probably mispronouncing that. And so what we didn't know is, had this cotton thread been pre-shrunk like his cotton fabric? And so no one could really tell us for sure. Everyone agreed that cotton shrinks, but no one could tell us if this thread would shrink. So what we did is a tester sample to make sure that we weren't going to put all this effort and time into this project and then be using the wrong type of thread. And so we just stitched that. Can you put it in the wash and the dryer? Did you use heat?
The water was cold because now that it was pre-shrunk, when I wash a slipcover like this, I just use cold water. And then I put it in a pretty hot dryer for probably about 15 minutes. Because with a slipcover, when you wash it, you want your ends to be just a little wet. Not wet, but just a little damp, and then you can put it back on more easily. And so that's what I did with this, and what we found out is that indeed, this did not shrink. And why is that?
We don't know for sure.
For sure, but
we
with a theory. You have a theory.
We think it has something to do with, and again I might mispronounce it, being mercanized, which is a heat process that high quality thread goes through. But nowhere does it state anywhere on any website or any blog I could find that cotton thread won't shrink. But there is a largely held opinion out there that if you buy good quality cotton thread, you are less likely to have any issues.
Right.
So this is in fact really good quality thread. And I do always recommend, if you're going to take the time to create something, especially something that's going to be in your home, choose great fabric and use great thread, so you don't waste your time.
I agree.
So we are going to start sewing. I don't know that we'll finish the covers today, but we will definitely keep you updated on the project progress, and we'll post finished photos. And then Kenny can hopefully offer some feedback, what he learned or how he thinks we could improve this, if he even enjoyed the project at all. I suspect he's going to like to sew. So I want to tell you about his machine real quick, because I always get a lot of questions, what kind of machine do you use? Typically I do not sew on the Singers. He has a Singer Tradition, which he inherited. Let's see if you can see that. It's a very nice machine. It's a very basic machine, but I will tell you, I stitched on this earlier this morning before you arrived. It has a great stitch. It's a nice heavy machine. It doesn't slip around on the table. So I think I could recommend this machine. I will let you know for sure after we've completed a whole project on it, but so far I really like it. Okay, so we're ready to get started. The machine's been threaded. I got a full bobbin in there, and a willing student. What we're going to do is logically reassemble this chair. What I have here is the very back of the chair. The nice thing, yes, the nice thing, even though the pattern was a little bit of a challenge when we were cutting it, the nice thing is we definitely have a clue here. And we know if it's upside down that's obviously not where the hem is. So that's gonna So it's gonna work out. So we have the back,
outside back, outside back, inside back,
inside back, and Kenny's going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, which he has no idea what that is. So we'll show him to stitch all the way across the top here. And the seam allowance is going to be crucial because that's how we cut out the pieces. So we need them to all go back. So can you see these little notches here?
Okay.
Okay, most machines have numbers. So I think this is where they save money on your machine. Do you see any numbers?
It's a mystery.
There are no numbers here, but we're going to want to pick what we think is a 1/2 inch from the needle. And then you're going to know that's the... second. Okay, so the needle's in the center. So the second line right there is where you're going to line up the edge of this fabric. And that is your seam allowance. Okay, so we'll just start back here from the edge. So we want the second line. Yep, so the one right before that.
And that is my alignment, so I gotta keep this thing on that line?
Yes, so like when you play baseball and they say keep your eye on the ball, we're keeping our eye on the line. All right, so the foot goes down before you can sew.
Okay.
If you start sewing with that foot up, you'll tie your thread in knots and have to start over. Now, once you cross over to that second piece of fabric, you're going to want to go forward 3 stitches and then reverse stitch. And
what?
Do you remember why we reverse stitch?
To lock it.
To lock it in.
Okay.
So as soon as you cross over to the second piece of fabric, reverse just to lock it.
Okay. Do you want me to start?
You're ready, yep.
And how fast do I want this to go?
Medium. Ooh, and know where your hands are.
Yes. Is that far enough and then I reverse now?
Are you on? Yep, that's fine.
Okay. Wait.
And you have to press it down and then press the pedal.
Oh, with my finger on this thing.
So now your stitch is locked, and now you can continue all the way to the end. When you get to the end of the second piece, reverse stitch again.
What if this fabric isn't cut straight?
It won't matter as long as you sew straight. That would be a great vlog, sew straight.
Not a great blog. I just moved this to the 3rd line.
We saw that.
We saw that, sorry.
So try and recover. The other benefit to this fabric, it has a lot of stretch, and stretch translates into forgiveness. So
which evidently I need a lot of forgiveness.
You've been forgiven. Okay, see how these 2 pieces aren't aligned? So just stop and scoot it over.
Okay.
And then go all the way to the end of where the 2 pieces meet, and then go in reverse. Good job.
Is that it?
Yes.
And then
So now his needle ends in the up position, so he doesn't have to worry about, some machines end with the needle down, but you do have to lift up your foot pedal here. So you lift that up and then pull out your thread. And so it looks like it's a little, yeah. There we go. It's fine. As long as you see 2 threads, you're good.
And then I cut it, right?
Yes. And then give it a little bit of a long tail. Okay, so now we'll take
I just learned what long tail means.
I don't know that I've told them what it means, but if you leave a long tail, then you don't have to worry about rethreading your needle. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So this is the back.
Doesn't match.
Right, going over the top. It doesn't, but at least the pattern's going in the right direction.
Well,
So that's what you'll see from the back of his bar stool, and then this will be the front of the bar stool. Okay, so the next logical piece to attach is the seat, which we know then we're gonna flip over like this, so the pattern
call
is
this the
going like
inside
this.
seat.
Right, so this will go like this, so that your pattern's going in the right direction. And with this, the one portion is smaller than the other, so we just want to work from the side that we can see the shortest side, so you don't miss anything. And I'm just lining up those top edges, and then I'll put in 2 pins for him, just to hold everything there,
Am I sewing the whole thing?
right here.
Just the same.
Same thing all the way across, and then don't forget to reverse stitch, trying to stay on that
And then do I
second line.
Same.
Yep, so start here and go.
And does it matter that there's this?
No, because this is
Extra?
where it's going to come together with those triangles.
Okay, so
So line it up with that,
okay.
and just make sure to reverse stitch. Don't forget to put this foot down, or you're going to sew your
Oh, thank you.
fingers off.
Okay, now it doesn't.
It should go if you give it a little bit more gas. Okay, and if that doesn't,
Where's that one?
oh yeah, it is a, there we go. It is a little, let's see what's happening. Okay, try now.
And then reverse.
Yes.
Ow!
Was it the needle?
Yeah, the pin.
Oh
I'm sure that happens a lot.
no. Yeah.
Ah, okay. There we go. Awesome.
Okay, stop.
Why?
Okay, just because that part was getting a
Okay.
little bit over. Okay, so when you get to that end, then reverse stitch.
Is that it?
All right, yes.
Okay.
And it looks like his needle like ended kind of halfway down and halfway up. So I think with this machine, the reason it was tangled is just move the needle to all the way
From here?
to the up. Yes. So when you're working with a sewing machine, never turn it backwards. You always turn it towards you.
That would be backwards.
Always bring it towards you.
Okay, bring it towards me.
Always, yes. And so that is probably the full, you know, the needle in the fully
Okay.
extended up position, which is what you'll want. And now the bobbin should unwind a little nicer.
Oh,
We don't have 3, so that's good. Is that better?
that is better. Oopsie. Okay. And then. Okay.
And then 2 long tails. And when you're learning to sew, if you get in these habits right away, then you'll avoid so much frustration with rethreading, tangled bobbins, because a lot of new sewists run into those problems and then just quit. They think that there's either something wrong with their machine or with them. And I can tell you, this is a base model machine, and it's perfectly capable of doing this if you just give it those few favors. End with the needle all the way up and a long tail. Easy, right?
Piece of cake.
Okay.
Thank God you're here.
All right.
Okay.
So we're almost done.
No, we're not. Can't be. Impossible.
There's only 2 more pieces to attach before we can put it completely together. It's been a couple weeks since we were last with you, and we have finally finished the chair cover. We actually made 2. Kenny sewed one and I sewed the other.
Shh. She wasn't supposed to tell you that.
Just because we were running out of time and I need to wrap up this slipcover series. So you'll recall we started by tearing apart his original cover and then adding a seam allowance and then reassembling that. The process was not without a few glitches, even for myself, which was interesting because I agreed to sew the second slipcover today, and rarely do I get frustrated sewing, and I did. And what I realized was that it doesn't have so much to do with how much experience you have sewing, but it has a lot more to do with the order of operation. The order in which the piece goes back together is critical. So we really would have no way of knowing that.
No, we have no way of knowing that.
This was the first slipcover, official slipcover I've ever sewn. I think it's fair to say it's not a beginner project.
But I pulled it off. I did do it,
You
but I
did.
had a lot of help, so maybe I cheated just a little bit.
And he did have a good sewing machine, so that helped. But the corners and angles on this chair were a little tricky. At one point we had some ears that we worked with.
Because the way these angles come up on the side are very tricky, and so 3 or 4 pieces of fabric met, and it just became
At
very
one
Mickey Mouse-like.
Yes. Yes. So overall, how do you think they turned out?
I think they turned out great. I'm very, very pleased, considering I've never sewn anything in my entire life that on a machine or otherwise. Maybe a button once or twice.
Okay.
And so I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm very happy with the work.
Will you ever attempt this project again?
Tomorrow. Yes, I'm going to try this again because as you saw, I own a furniture store, and when I showed Peyton, my wife, that I made a slipcover, she started pointing around the house. Now that one, and that one. And she's very happy, so I think I have a slave driver at home. So
Okay.
we'll see what happens, and I'll keep you up to date on my progress.
So my best piece of advice for you and Kenny, if he attempts to make another slipcover, is the seam ripper is your best friend.
Best friend. Very
Yes.
sharp. It's very sharp.
But your best friend. So that'll do it for our slipcover series. Thank you so much
You're very
for
welcome.
contributing, and I
Thank
hope
you.
that the covers are enjoyed.
They will.
And until next time, remember, the creative genius in us salutes the creative genius in you.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful day, everyone.